Okay, welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm Dan Tilson, your host, and over there we have...
I'm John.
Hey, glad to have you, John.
How's it going?
Great, man. How has your week been?
It's been great. We just got done celebrating the 4th of July. I think America is officially boomer status, as the kids say. 249 young years old.
That's right.
That is correct. I had to double check with you being the political guru. I had to just double check there. No, it was a great time. We actually went to the same 4th of July party. We had a good time with some family and friends in town and had some good food, had some beverages.
We definitely had beverages.
We had beverages.
Yeah, and water.
And water. Water, fun fact, is a beverage.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it was a great time. It was a great time. And then reality hit right after the 4th of July as I went right back to work.
Back to work. Yeah. People are actually in Washington, D.C. already talking about how we're going to celebrate the 4th of July next year, considering it will be 250. And gotta admit, I was afraid when that conversation came up. But a number of political organizations have actually said they're going to focus on encouraging, I guess you could say, quote unquote, acts of America, which would be looking out for your neighbor, trying to use your voice not to divide, but to unify, to take more engagement politically in healthier ways. So I don't know. It's probably not going to work out that way, but I do love the enthusiasm I heard this past week that people realize we need a reset here in America politically.
I mean, if you can tell me that I'll be able to get into DC on July 4th next year without having to avoid the tanks, the marching troops down the street and everything else, I'll take it. I'll take it. Like, just don't shut my streets down. But actually to go to your message of unity, and I really hate to bring this up because there's nothing that unifies the country more than unified tragedy, it feels like. And I'm going to date ourselves here a little bit. Back when we were in our younger years, when September 11th happened, the way the country came together and put aside politics, put aside personal differences, and we were all Americans for at least, I would say, about 2 months.
Yes.
But those 2 months was nice. People, especially in the DMV area, were very cordial. People realized, hey, this is a thing that just happened. People were kind and nice, and they were actually caring for one another. It was kind of nice to see that in the country.
I really hope that we can relive that in a way without having to go through a tragedy. But World War II is actually what led up to Vatican II.
Mm-hmm.
I know that most of the devastation in terms of cities being leveled, none of that really happened here in the United States. And so sometimes we have a little bit of a movement against Vatican II here because we don't quite understand why things had to change. But there were bishops on both sides during World War II that were saying, God is calling you to this holy war, go defend the fatherland. And after the war was done, you had all these Catholics that looked around at the rubble everywhere and the total destruction. And they're like, wait a minute, my bishop said this, but also the bishop on the opposing side said the same thing. And we're both allegedly listening to the same God. And so I think that was one of the things that Vatican II ultimately had to grapple with, was how do we foster the spirit of unity? And unfortunately, it does take destruction to get there. So that's not what this week's episode is about.
Shocker.
No, but let me tell you real quick about my week. So it wasn't the tanks in the military parade that kept me from getting to DC. It was my own car, actually, which is much, much smaller than a tank. A joint light tactical vehicle, one might say.
If you have to deal with DC traffic, yes.
My Honda Civic, my poor Honda Civic.
RIP Honda Civic.
I took it into the, I guess for legal purposes, we'll call it Cliffy Tube, to get the oil changed in my car. Cliffy Tube is a place that I've been taking my vehicle for many, many years, and they've usually done a good job, although they've never been jiffy about anything. And and as I was pulling out, I noticed that the oil light was on in my car, and I thought, it's so easy to knock those sensors around. I'm sure it's fine. Like, they just did the oil change.
Loose gas cap.
Probably, right? And I pulled out, and then I started to hear rattling, and I knew in my gut that something was wrong, but I just didn't want to address it because, you know, Cliffy Tube has always done me justice. So a week later, uh, the turbo gasket, there's going to be a mechanic writing in saying like everything you just said was wrong. And that's fine because I'm here for theology and not to fix cars.
Theology for the unwanted, not theology for the car.
Exactly. But it turns out that Cliffy Tube had not put oil back into my vehicle. And, that was not a fixable mistake.
No.
So I do have a new car now, and I now know to trust my gut instinct. What would they say here in DC? Trust but verify. Right?
Yeah, but they also tell you if you see something, say something.
Oh, that's right. That's the old.
So there's that too. You saw something, you just
ignored
didn't
it.
say something.
In graduate school, I actually wrote a paper on how Homeland Security's "See Something, Say Something" campaign was a total failure because everyone just assumed that somebody else would say something.
Correct.
So, okay, well, anyway, for this episode today, I'm a little nervous because I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to tell a little bit about my story as a gay Catholic who has received one of those blessings. Me and my spouse, we have received one of those blessings that has been so fought about on social media. And we're going to talk through the theology behind it because, quite frankly, I think that both sides tend to get this completely, totally wrong. And of course, I'm talking about Fiducia Supplicans, a document that Pope Francis inaugurated about 2.5 years ago. But I'm sure you've heard people say, like, oh, the Pope said that we can bless gay unions, right? Yeah.
All over social media.
Exactly. But you then have the seemingly tens of thousands of people who will immediately go straight to the comments and correct it, saying, no, 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 we're blessing the individuals, not the union. And that also completely misses the theological point of this. No, it's not an endorsement of a union, but there is a good theological reason that we're doing this now. So we'll go into it. And part of it is because Cardinal Fernandez, who is still the head of the doctrine office at the Vatican, he came out in the news just a couple days ago saying that he believes that Pope Leo intends to keep this document in place. Of course, we don't know if that means that it's going to be narrowed or if it's going to be clarified further, but that the Pope is not expected to set this document aside. And so Catholics are having to grapple with the fact that this is part of our church. There was a real, authentic, organic development in the doctrine, but we're going to talk about what it actually was. So, John Byram, the other week we talked a little bit about your story. We had our friend Jeremy from A Catholic Dad. The two of you ganged up on me as converts.
It was not a gang. Look here. If you're still feeling bad about that, allow me to give you a compliment.
Please do.
You will always be able to pronounce the names of Vatican documents. I will not because I never learned Latin. And you did as a cradle Catholic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the best compliment I ever got when I was doing some work for the Holy See was, of course, they had not really had an American working over there. And at least for the particular nunciature, the embassy I was working at.
Or an American that could speak Italian as well as you did.
No. But they had not had an American before. And I'll never forget this Polish canon lawyer priest looking over at me and going, say, wow, your Latin is so good, because normally I get like a, Deo gratias in a Texas accent. And I was like, oh, okay, well, duly noted. So, but no, we had a great episode 2 weeks ago, hearing a little bit about your story as a convert and Jeremy as well, and some of the things that both of you left behind in order to become Catholic. And last week we had a fantastic conversation with Cade. Cade was a lot of fun. I don't know if you had any further thoughts on that episode.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I thought one of the cool things about that episode was, him challenging his own faith in his own faith journey, eventually leaving the church. There was a lot of similarities to my faith journey and myself coming to the church. So, again, asking questions, diving deeper into your into your faith isn't a bad thing. And you should always do that. You should always ask questions. It's something I also mentioned in the episode with Jeremy, was that, I'm known at my parish as the guy who always asks the priest questions about his homily and asks him to dive deeper, because I want to better understand the theology and where he's coming from. Because obviously he went to seminary, I did not. So I kind of want to have that deeper dive. So I always encourage people to ask questions, and asking questions has strengthened my faith, where with Cade, asking questions and seeking truth led him away from the faith. And again, for completely valid reasons too. I'm not going to sit here and trash the guy. I think what he's doing is absolutely incredible. Being kind of that voice and support for people that are kind of in that same position. But it just goes to show you how discernment can lead you deeper in faith and can also lead you out of faith, depending upon what you're trying to discern.
Oh, I super respected him as well, because he really committed to not following an ideology, but pursuing like reality. And theology is nothing more than reality. It's kind of like in our first episode, we talked about how we're all living in this dark room. It's the same room, but you can't really see anything around you. And the truth is the light that we're holding. And the truth is what gives us the freedom to navigate about the cabin, because we can see where we're going. And so a lot of Cade's ideas I actually thought were super Catholic and super relevant for our listeners. So we did someone who converted. We did an episode with someone who left the faith. And this week, we're talking a little bit more about my experiences, which unfortunately, as I've come to learn, are not uncommon at all. A lot of people don't share their experiences, those who are gay Catholics who want to stay in the pews. Even those who are married civilly, they may not want to talk about it, but they're there. They're in your parishes. And people reach out to me all the time. And they're like, hey, I'm one of those people, but nobody around me knows. And so, in my background growing up, I was an altar server. I was a catechist. I was part of an immigrant ministry. I currently run a homeless ministry at my church every Sunday. As a teen, I worked in a rectory, which, by the way, thank goodness is no longer allowed in the diocese that I grew up in. But I was also, what did you call me? A liturgia geek?
If we're going to rehash that episode, yes, liturgia geek was the nickname I called you.
I absolutely loved experiencing the faith through our rituals, through the liturgy. I grew up with Mass and Latin. My story really rhymes with Cade from our last episode, except that I decided I'm staying. I'm here, and I'm really, really happy to be here. And I want all of the listeners to be able to find, no matter what it is that they're experiencing, to find a way to survive and thrive as a Catholic without really having to doubt themselves, but to still be pursuing the truth and knowing that, yes, you belong. You're a full member of our church, and that our Catholic family is not complete without you. So let's start this off by going through what has changed in the theological landscape as far as discernment goes. John, have you ever had a time where your experiences said one thing, but your gut instinct said do something different, and you decided at the end of the day, despite your past experiences, despite your knowledge of the situation, that you were going to follow your gut?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to a time, anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of live music. I enjoy going to concerts.
Emo kid.
I am a recovering emo kid.
No, not recovering.
Not recovering. It is not a phase. But yeah, so I was going to a tour that's no longer in existence called the Taste of Chaos Tour, which was essentially the winter version of Warped Tour. For all of the young kids out there that don't know what Warped Tour is, it used to be something that happened at more than just 3 locations like it did in this year.
Speaking of dating yourself.
Yeah, right. But nonetheless, so it was held at a local university, and I was going with some friends from high school, and I met up with them in the parking lot. They were already there. We were all well under the legal age in America for drinking adult beverages.
That's 21.
That is 21 for our international listeners. Yes, we are aware our rules are weird here. But they were partaking in said beverages. I got there, and there was a band from Maryland that was there, and they were supplying the drinks. They had their little hippie van. We were listening to music, hanging out, having a good time. They offered me a drink, but just because I just got there, I really wasn't in the mood because I had to fight traffic to get there. I was like, my head was like, okay, once things calm down, I'll grab a drink. Not a big deal for legal purposes. May or may not have had a beverage underage prior. So right before I went over to grab a drink, my gut was like, hey, you really probably shouldn't do this. Something just doesn't feel right. And I was like, I'm just getting nervous. It's no big deal. And before I got to the van to grab the beer, I noticed a guy walking around our group that, have you ever been at a place where there's like one person that's just like the stereotype of what you expect to see there to the T?
The hall monitor?
Kind of, yeah. This guy was there dressed in very stereotypical emo alt rock kind of
trying too hard.
Yeah. And I remember he had a shirt. It had the fake Nike symbol on it, and it had a blunt and said, just doob it. It was bad. And he was walking around. I'm just like, this guy seems out of place. Not 10 seconds later, he grabbed someone, threw him to the ground. A minivan drives up. 10 people jump out of this minivan. People are being thrown to the ground. And then I look around the corner. I see handcuffs. And then once everything settled down and people were in cuffs on the ground and I'm standing there because I'm just like, I didn't do anything wrong. They identified themselves as the police. It was an undercover sting looking for underage drinking.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So you trusted your gut.
I did.
And despite what you were seeing all around you before that moment, which was people having a good time, didn't seem like there was any law enforcement, and it was probably going to be no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Correct.
So theology is finally starting to grapple with the idea that we have gut instincts.
What?
Yeah. There is a Franciscan, by the way, as always, I promise to find a Franciscan theologian.
I do appreciate that.
Okay, wonderful. So we have Padre Giovanni Salonia. He is a professor, I believe, at Gregorian in Rome, which is one of the Vatican's universities. He's a moral theologian. He actually likes to talk about diabetes. I don't know if he has it or if he just really likes sugar.
Who doesn't like sugar?
Certainly not the Franciscans. So he talks about how we have these perceived rules, right? Like your doctor says, can't have sugar, but you have this deep craving. And so the instinct is to think that the craving or that thing that you naturally desire in your body is wrong. But that's not always the case. In fact, having these cravings, even those that go against the perceived rules of the church, of medicine, whatever, it should, if we're trained, it should draw us into some sort of deeper reflection. Do I have a craving because I'm stressed out? Do I have a craving because I'm lonely? Do I have a craving because my blood sugar's low and maybe I actually do need a little sugar? So he talked about it in terms of cravings that point us to something deeper, even if on the surface they seem against the rules. Now, another moral theologian, Maria Cruciani, she talked about how the church has formally moved towards changing the way that we discern. She said that before Pope Francis, really before Amoris Laetitia, so only over the past 10 years, if we were to talk about discernment, well, what does discernment bring up for you? What do you think?
I mean, just my past experiences with discernment where I'm praying and contemplating about a major decision, whether it was my faith journey or whether it's I'm going to be, moving on from a job or accepting a promotion or taking on a new challenge in life. It's something that is a process.
Had you used that term discernment before you became Catholic?
Not the word discernment. I would just call, I'm going to go home and think about it.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. You see how theology is often a lot more simple than we make it out to be. You're going to go home and you're going to think about it. But of course, with discernment, we're adding in that element of prayer and encountering others so we can ask their experiences too. Did you have any further thoughts on discernment that you wanted to share before I go?
I mean, discernment's what led me to the Catholic Church. Discernment is what led me to my time with the Conventual Franciscans.
Sure.
Which is a community that even though I'm not a member of anymore, I am still very connected with. And pray for that community on the daily. Have several good friends that are fully consecrated members of the Franciscans that I still talk with. We have a good friend from our own university that is a part of it. In fact, actually, our own university had about 7 friars at one time, but now it's kind of dwindled down. But it was really cool. But yeah, discernment led me to a lot of really good experiences within the church.
So traditionally, discernment is about seeking the priesthood, or if you're a woman, thinking about becoming a nun. It's a fairly straightforward, like you're thinking about going to live and be a full-time member of a religious order. And of course, all of us have to discern in our lives. And the church is finally grappling with the idea that it's not just about that. In fact, couples who are already married, whether things are going well or whether their marriage is shaky, they have to discern too. We're starting to describe discernment as an ongoing process, but not just in the sense that you go to a spiritual director and you tell that spiritual director what's on your heart, and then he or she says, do this, and then you do it. No, we are shifting the idea of discernment to something that all people, all Christians do actively at all times, and that the priest is not a referee, not maybe he's more like a coach. And of course, the decisions that the players make on the field, that they own those decisions, but the coach is there to try and keep you on more or less the right path. And so this is a major, major change. We used to just say discernment would be go talk to your vocations director, tell them what you're thinking, and they'll say if you're ready. And then at the end of your 6 years, you'll, the laying on of hands, and then you'll go do good things. That's the way it has historically been. And now it is time for us to go deeper because the world is so much more complicated now. And since Vatican II, we understand the laity, those of us who are not priests or nuns, that we play an integral role in the church itself. That's the first change. The second change is the idea that time is superior to space. I don't know if that makes sense right offhand, but you and I exist in time, as in today's date. It is July 10th, 2025, but we're also existing in a space. Right now, you and I are in Northern Virginia, and that's the space that we exist in. The church is moving past the idea that discernment is making decision like flipping a light switch. We used to say, jump on in, try it out, the water's fine, just do it. Now we understand that it's an ongoing process. It's not flipping a light switch and today I'm holy and yesterday I was not holy, but that we're constantly reevaluating and growing. Did you experience any of that in your own discernment with the Franciscans?
Yeah, definitely no light switch moment for sure. It was a gradual growth of not just my faith, but my prayer life, my understanding of the faith through the lens of the Franciscans. And in all honesty, there is a lot of the Franciscan flavored theology that I really do to this day still abide by and still practice, because to me, it just makes more sense to live out my faith with that Franciscan twang to it, if you will. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a light switch moment. And, I could have seen myself continuing with the community as well. Things just didn't work out the way for both parties, and that's completely fine.
It's complicated.
It is. I mean, it's a story that definitely doesn't need to be rehashed. At the end of the day, I still
it
respect
wasn't
the
a
community.
situationship.
No, there was nothing scandalous. There's nothing bad about it. It was a miscommunication. We'll leave it at that. And to this day, I keep in touch with the community. They keep in touch with me. I keep up to date with everything that's going on. I still support them. I don't know if they listen to this or not, but I send in donations, but they don't know that. They might now if they're listening. But yeah, I spend a lot of time, still practicing the Franciscan spirituality in my daily life and in my life in my local parish.
So discernment, even though you didn't get ordained, it changed you.
It did.
And it sounds like it changed you for the better.
I really can't think of a time where I've gone through either discernment or a long thought process, if you will, where I'm talking to other people that I trust that will give me their opinion, that will be able to help me maybe see the other side of something I'm thinking about, kind of challenge my thoughts a bit to really solidify decisions. I can't really think of any time, even if it wasn't the outcome I wanted, I can't think of a time where discernment wasn't ultimately fruitful.
Yeah, you said something really profound about the nature of discernment, that it's simply you go home and you think about things. You think about what went on in your life prior to this moment and where you're headed. When I look at Don Alfredo Jacopozi, he's a priest in the Diocese of Florence, Italy, but he's also a theologian. He talks about discernment going beyond dogma and moralism. Now, I think to us here in America, we get a little bit afraid when somebody is like, set down your dogma. The dogma lives loudly inside me. But really, theology is a lived experience. It's a experience of life. And so Don Jacopozi, he was saying that we need to move discernment beyond a rigid, moralistic perception of God. Things are complicated now. I- Instead of looking at Jesus as a judge or a master, we have to understand him as a father. In other words, any dad is going to look at their child to see the mistakes or the successes that they're making in life, and they're not going to throw them away. They're not going to just say, don't do that or you're kicked out of my family. That's not the paternal father that we have in Jesus Christ. And so we have to understand that discernment is a very dynamic and living experience. And for increasingly more and more Catholics, it is not black and white. If you just look at those who are divorced, divorce rates are on the rise. And I know that back in high school, they would tell me that Catholics who practice NFP, natural family planning, that they only had like a divorce rate of 2%. I don't know that we can really quote things from the 80s anymore and say like, hey, this is a serious statistic, because a lot of things have changed. It is probably still true that Catholics who are faithful to natural family planning have a lower divorce rate, but I doubt that it is 2%. So we have to understand that the world is getting more and more complicated. And in many ways, it's getting more and more toxic. And so discernment is about helping people understand those inner desires that they have. And how do you orient that? How do you point it towards God? And of course, the Franciscan really like to use, the person with diabetes and has a sugar craving, but you and I have other cravings. And the church and its rules are not always fully ready to help us walk in the gray, and instead tries to make it too black and white. What do you think?
I agree. I think, especially in the church in America, like we touched on in past episodes, where the church and theology has a more legalistic flavor to it. When you deal with things that are legal, your mind automatically goes, well, it's either legal or it's illegal. So if we're applying that to the church, it's either accepted or it's not accepted. It's good for you or it's a sin, and it ruins your relationship with God. And it does tend to be a little bit more in the gray area. And I think with myself, having come into the church in our area and then having my experience with the Franciscans, where, my formation house was in Chicago, my experience with the Archdiocese of Chicago was very, very different than my home diocese. And they kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there is that gray area in the church where you do have to have discernment, not just for what you're going to do with your life in terms of, are you called to the priesthood? Are you called to religious life? Are you a religious brother? Are you going to become a nun or a sister or whatever it is? It comes down to, making decisions of, hey, am I going to listen to what I'm craving? Am I going to listen to what I want for myself? Or am I going to try to live my life in a way that's holy and respectful to God and suppress those urges in order to show my devotion to our loving God and live out my life the best way I possibly can through his teachings. So yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, realizing that there is a gray area is kind of shocking and almost, I'm not going to say like, I think of it to use your dead car analogy here. It's kind of like jumping your car. Your battery's dead a little bit. Your battery's either working or it's dead. And then, there's this gray area that comes in and jumpstarts your battery. You're like, well, wait a minute. Is my car back? Is my battery good to go? It's kind of like that with your faith when you realize there is that gray area.
We get bogged down by Catholic guilt a lot. You said you learned that pretty early on when you became, actually even before you finished your conversion process, right?
Yeah.
You told that story about feeling that Catholic guilt in confession. So going back to Father Jacopozzi, he talks about the difference in discernment between guilt, which leaves you nailed down to the cross, and sin. Sin, he says, is about missing the mark. Now, do you remember when we talked about John chapter 8 in a previous episode where Jesus says to the woman, get up and sin no more?
Yes.
Do you remember what we said that term actually is in Greek?
I do not. My Greek is a little rough around the edges.
That's fine. It's really a cradle Catholic game anyway. So.
It is. It really is.
But the thing that we need to understand when Jesus says, get up and sin no more, he's using an archery term. He's saying that you have missed the mark, or as Father Jacopozzi says, that you have missed the center. And so it's this idea that in discernment, we are accompanying people. We are not imposing rules on them, although the church has rules for very good reasons. We are not condemning them where we're saying, have guilt and just sit here in your misery. No, we're saying we have to find you, make the mark. If you're shooting an arrow, we have to help you find the center. And it's going to take practice. And the church is increasingly understanding that in a complicated world, that we can't send somebody to a psychologist or a priest or a doctor and have that professional say, no, don't do that. And then they go home and they do it anyway. And then we wonder, well, why were they so obstinate? Why did they hate the church? That is very rarely the reality. We have to take a more active role in accompanying people. That is precisely what Christ did. That is exactly what you find in the story of the prodigal son. And so discernment, the role of the priest in discernment is not to say, here's the rule, go follow. It's to say, here's the center, here's what you're aiming for, and I'm going to walk with you as long as it takes to help you find the center. So how does discernment apply to individuals with same-sex attraction or identify as gay or LGBT, whatever it is that you prefer to say? How might discernment matter to them in this situation?
That's a great question. I would imagine, it's going to be tough because, again, like just having viewed some of my friends who have had to go through the struggle of their same-sex attraction and also wanting to be committed to the faith, obviously there is this tug of war going on, right? And my experience with the church community here in the States is you really have to be lucky based upon the parish you're going to really have a support group that is going to be there to walk with you. A lot of times, as soon as you start to vocalize your struggle with same-sex attraction, that's when the community starts to kind of push you towards that last pew,
right,
off to the side corner, and eventually out the door, which is really upsetting because, again, as I mentioned before, like the church community is supposed to be a community, right? You're a group of sinners. The church is a hospital for sinners, and we have the best doctor in Jesus there to help us overcome sin or anything that we're struggling with, to have that love that no matter what we're going through, there's a loving God there for you. And that love is injected into the community. And as a community, that love is supposed to be projected on the individual in the community. And I feel like that's where we as a church really struggle, is we're very quick to point fingers at someone who doesn't fit the cookie cutter Catholic and kind of push them to that back pew off to the left corner in the church community.
So it's only been about 10 years since the church has formally grappled with the idea that discernment is a process where the person who's trying to make decisions about their lives is a true protagonist in this. Like I said, historically, it has been you go to a spiritual director, you go to a formation director, and you say, "This is what's on my heart. What do I do with this?" And they say, "Enter seminary," which is something that I heard over and over again when I said I have same sex attraction. I was pushed almost aggressively by some to enter seminary. Of course, I didn't. And it's also complicated because I also love our church. And so if somebody says this is your path, in many ways, it did make sense to me. So now that discernment is very formally becoming a two-way street where the church is helping us make the mark, where using that archery term, we're trying to not miss, we're trying to get a bullseye. Now that we understand it's like that, it is going to take the church a very long time to kick its bad habits of imposing ideas on people. And so for the people who have said to me, like, stop that, don't be gay, I
How has that worked for you, by the way?
I certainly tried.
You just
I certainly tried. To all the people that have said that to me in many various forms, I don't blame them, because deep down in their heart, I think most of them wanted to help me hit a bullseye, but they didn't really have the ability to understand how to discern or help me discern complex feelings and complex urges, much like the person with diabetes wanting sugar. So for people like me who are discerning, how do I live as a Catholic with same-sex attraction? How do I be a faithful Catholic, a good Catholic? A lot of us have a tendency to want to follow the rules like a checklist, because that is all that we have been told growing up. So, of course, I really enjoyed attending Latin Mass. I actually enjoyed it as a ritual, as a way of experiencing the Eucharist. But it also gave me a little bit of extra assurances that should God be angry with me for the way that he created me, or for the same-sex attraction that I'm experiencing, I was like, hey, well, at least I went to Mass in Latin, right? That's got to be at least 2 extra credit points. So,
it's funny you say that, because I remember a time during my conversion, I would make jokes about purgatory, about how when you do good deeds, this is a very Lutheran take here. When you do good deeds, you buy time off of purgatory. Like, it was a joke I would make, and you were very quick to be like, ah, yes, the convert making a joke about something he doesn't know. That's not how it works. You didn't say it directly like that, but that was kind of the vibe I was getting from you when I would make a joke or two.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, because 10, 15 years ago, I was so on fire for our faith. I'm still very much on fire for our faith, but I was holding my feelings deep down, and the only way I understood how to grapple with that was tell me what the rules are and I'm going to follow it. And it's actually pretty common for someone to reach out to me and say, hey, I have same-sex attraction. Like you, I'm a conservative. I don't feel liberal, so I'm not switching sides. I don't feel Lutheran. I don't feel Protestant, so I'm not switching sides. But people come to me all the time and they're like, now that I know, I'm definitely going to stay Catholic, which is also what I hope for them too. They say, it seems like I have 2 options. It is either priesthood, if they're a man, or convent, if they're a woman, but it's either priesthood or celibacy alone. And so I say, wait a minute, before we can even begin to talk about if you're called to the priesthood, we have to understand 2 things. One, are you discerning holiness, which is gearing your entire life towards that idea of I'm going for the bullseye. I'm trying to aim my life towards Christ. And of course, many of the takes with my arrow I'm going to miss, but I'm aiming for it. And 2, are you also pursuing this with full authenticity? Meaning that you're not trying to have an overly positive assumption of yourself or an overly negative assumption of yourself. You're just trying to live reality. If you have same-sex attraction, that's just a part of who you are. It's an important part. So there's a temptation sometimes to either make it the whole personality or not a part of your personality at all. That is not authentic. And so the 2 things that I tell people if they come to me and they're like, am I supposed to be a priest? I say, well, maybe. We have a lot of really, really good priests who are gay and are celibate, But you have to understand whether or not you are gearing your life towards holiness and if you're being fully authentic. And once you are sure that you're on that path, pursuing those two things, then we can start to talk about, okay, what is it in your life? What is it that you really crave? How is God calling you to live out these cravings? How are these cravings forcing you to look deeper, deep down and understand how it is that you create harmony in the Catholic community? Of course, it's going to take us a long time to get over this black and white presumption, but we're getting there. And I think just as the church is realizing that a psychologist can't just say, hey, stop, don't do that. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They're also starting to understand that the human person is very complex, that sexual orientation is a thing. And as we grapple with that, we're going to have to figure out what to do with it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on like where the church might end up in another 10 or 15 years.
There's no way to tell, right? The church goes the way that our God wants it to go. I think it definitely needs to be more inclusive in the sense of we're not trying to force people out. I think that's a great way to really kill our community, kill our parishes, and really harm the church. At the end of the day, I like to remind people that, if you're going to sit in a pew and you're judging other people, saying, what are they doing here? I know what they've done. Why are they here? You have to remember those people that you're judging are the people that Jesus was the closest with.
True.
He walked with them. He sat with them. He ate with them. And that's what we're called to do as Christians, as followers of Jesus. We are called to dine, to eat, to support, to help, to pray for those who we may not see eye to eye with, to those who may be in a different part of their spiritual journey or dealing with something in their spiritual journey. It is a community effort. Yes, there is a personal faith journey aspect to it, but at the end of the day, what Jesus did was communal. He surrounded himself with people. He didn't shy away from challenges. He didn't shy away from those uncomfy moments. He embraced them because that's where the people were. That's where the people are to this day. And that's where we need to be as a church. And that's ultimately what I hope happens with the church going forward is we finally get to that point where we go to mass for the correct reasons and we're spending our time in prayer with our Lord and not spending our time for social reasons at church and giving that good old-fashioned Catholic side eye in the pews.
100%. So I would say for the many, many, many Catholics that disagree with my decision to be married as a man with same-sex attraction because they feel it is contrary to the church's teaching, again, the church is understanding how do we take people in complicated, imperfect scenarios, as the church would say, and help them to aim better. And so even if your desire for me is to no longer be married, to no longer be, I found a lot of stability and positivity in my life since getting married. And so it's actually, it's funny to see just how many people around me are like, wait a minute, he seems to be living a very virtuous life, but that's not what I'm told he's doing. So it's funny just how surprised people are when they encounter me in church and they see me as the barista after mass, because our church has a coffee bar. When I say it like that, it sounds very queer, but it's not. So I'm the barista after your 10:30 mass.
You don't wear your apron with your fedora or
ciao,
and you're not speaking Italian the entire. Oh, you probably are while you're serving.
Yeah, it's an Italian language church, but. Which, by the way, is how I came to understand that the Catholic Church has very different approaches depending on where you are. So if we're a universal church, we can't simply say, okay, what they're doing in this section of the United States is the way. That's a form of relativism. But what we can say is that even if you disagree with somebody, you have to understand that time is superior to space, meaning that me as I exist right now, even though you want to reform me so bad, it's not like flipping a light switch. Instead, it's like Jesus said, where you're helping me take better aim. You're helping me practice archery so I can ultimately get that bullseye. Now, in the process, even in working with Catholics that are really upset at my decision to be married, I want to challenge them equally to go deeper into their own urges, their own cravings, their own sense of who they are, and to understand that they were made not only in the image of God, but also in the likeness of God. Has anyone ever explained the difference?
Shockingly enough, going through RCIA, we've never really touched on that, the idea of image versus likeness.
Okay, but you have heard like you're made in the image and likeness of God,
Correct.
right? Yeah. So putting on my capitalist conservative hat for a second, I like to think of the likeness part as a valuation, almost like we're at Shark Tank and we're trying to figure out how much is something actually worth. But one of the first things that I say to people who are struggling with their own attractions, and really when they're telling me that they're struggling with same-sex attraction, they're telling me they're struggling with their own self-worth because they feel that there's a part of them that is damaged. The reality is you're made in the image of God, but also the likeness of God, meaning that there are characteristics about you that in some way reflect back the divine, the creator, and his creativity. And therefore, there is something, John, there's something that you can teach me about God. There's something that you can teach the church and even the Pope about God that we may not be able to discover before we have that chance to encounter you. So praise God, I've met you. We've been friends for a long time. But to all those who have not yet had a chance to meet you, there is something about your personality and your knowledge and your unique experiences in life that reflect back a little bit of the value of the creator that he put inside of you and that only you can carry. And so the church wants us to, as we talk about communion, right? The church wants us to encounter that sameness within our community. And it's something that we learn to do more and more over time. So, Fiducia Supplicans, let's jump into the controversy here. Cardinal Fernandez, the head of the doctrine office at the Vatican, said that Pope Francis's, I want to say it was the end of 2023 document. Yeah, December 2023, saying that the church can now bless people in irregular unions, meaning if you're divorced and remarried, so you're not getting a sacramental wedding for that second wedding. And the church can bless you if you're gay and in a marriage. What is it that you have heard people say about this document?
Oh my goodness. It's the Catholic Church legalizing gay marriage. It's the Catholic Church allowing the recognition of gay civil unions in the church. It's solidifying the gay agenda in the church. I mean, social media is wild when it comes to this topic.
Oh, so you finally met the Lavender Mafia, huh?
I guess
that's what they call it in Rome.
You recently told me that, and that was a very interesting title for it.
So, as someone who does not aspire to be part of the Lavender Mafia, however, if I was in it, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to kill you. I was in Rome, I believe, a week after Fiducia Supplicans came out. And I had a chance to ask the Holy Father about this. There's a picture on my personal Instagram, and the caption says that I got life advice from the Pope in Italian that wasn't on my bingo card. I was asking him about this document. And you know what he said to me? He said, the reason that I allow these blessings is so that anyone, everyone, no matter their situation in life, no matter who they are, they know that they have to continue searching for the Lord and to know that the church does not condemn you. Now, if I were looking for some sort of endorsement of my marriage, hearing someone say, I don't condemn you, that's not a ringing endorsement, right? Like if you're asking your parents for approval with something and they're like, well, we don't condemn you, how would you feel?
I mean, it's that phrase. Oh boy, what was that phrase my parents said growing up? We're not mad at you.
We're just disappointed.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's such a guilt trip. Like, it's like, okay, I didn't make you mad, but you're also not like accepting of what I did or what I said or whatever. So that's, to me, if I asked the Pope that and that was his response, I don't know about you, I have a feeling you're about to tell us, but I would have that same feeling as when the one time I got sent to the principal's office in fourth grade, my mom goes, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, that's a dagger for sure. No, I had two immediate reactions that I felt deep down. And we've spent a lot of time in this episode talking about those feelings we have in our gut. I had two at the same time. It was I just spoke to the judge and the judge says he doesn't condemn me. That's a huge relief, right? Like if you're thinking like, "Oh, am I going to prison today?" and the judge says, "I don't condemn you." That's a wonderful feeling. At the same time, it was clearly not an acceptance. So I didn't feel any sort of endorsement at all. What the Holy Father was doing was he was reiterating those new theological developments that we have, where we now understand discernment as a process of helping people enrich their lives and learn how to seek God's will for themselves. And then, of course, you have, if you're getting a blessing from the church, that means that the church is committing to walking with you on that. And then the other part of that was the theological development that time is superior to space. So as I present myself before the Holy Father in that particular moment, he's saying, clearly he wasn't endorsing, but he's saying, you are a member of our community and you're valued exactly as you are, even if I don't believe, as the pastor of the church there, that you have hit the bullseye. And so it was refreshing, it was saddening, it was validating and invalidating all at the same time, but it called me to a much, much deeper relationship with Christ. Now, let's go back to what happened a couple months ago. What was that? Did you have a highlight of your trip in Belgium?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start.
Don't start with the beer. Start with where I want to go with this.
Okay. Well, there's that one fry place that no, absolutely. I thought it was quite possibly one of the biggest highlights. Also, not just the fact that I was able to be witness to your marriage, civil marriage, pardon me, but be witness to the blessing ceremony in Belgium. It was absolutely beautiful. I thought it was incredibly well done. I, amongst everyone else there, crying our eyes out.
There were a lot of tears.
But I think aside from the ceremony, I think the biggest part that had an impact on me was when you guys walked out and the church was ringing the bells. And for those who may not have seen how Catholic churches are built in European countries, the churches are the center of the city square, of the town square. So this church that you were in, which by the way was absolutely beautiful, was surrounded by pubs, restaurants, shops, families that are taking in the beauty of Antwerp. And it was a beautiful day. And we're all standing outside and the church is ringing the bells. Everyone's paying attention. And you guys walk out. And then something happened that I didn't think I would ever see in my life.
I'm smiling right now.
You guys got a standing ovation. They were clapping. They were cheering. Everyone was super excited because at the end of the day...
And nobody was confused that we were two men walking out. They knew exactly...
I mean, you guys also made it very obvious, but it was absolutely incredible, the love that was shown by the community for not just your love for your partner, but your love and dedication to the church still was a beautiful sight, not just for your civil marriage and for your friends and your family that was there, but for that entire community to bear witness and to show that support of two strangers that were obviously American. It was absolutely beautiful. And I think I took a video of it. I put it on my personal Instagram and I cut the video off short of me looking to two of our mutual friends saying, wow, one day in America, one day.
Yeah. It, even as you're retelling the story, I'm trying not to tear up because in my youth, I had both so desperately wanted to please my priests and my fellow Catholic community. And I felt so deeply unwanted. And I tried so hard to be straight. And in case they're listening, I would love an invitation to appear on the I Tried to Be Straight podcast. I'm one of your biggest fans. But I tried so hard to be better. And ultimately the decisions that I had to make to bring positivity and stability into my life, to be authentic and not to hide anymore. I had been told to keep secrets in the parish, and it was just so difficult, and it really brought me to the brink of disaster. So this was a very healing moment, because the ceremony, and I should note for our listeners, the reason we were over in Antwerp is because Pope Francis had allowed 6 dioceses in Europe to kind of stick their necks out and say, we want to do this in a ritualized way that shows people that we're like actually committed, that we're not on the fence about helping people discern and help people live the most Christian lives that we can, but we are all in. We are not afraid. It is not Germany. Germany has a very loud, anytime they sense some sort of injustice in Germany, they get very loud about it. And so it became too political. And so there's no diocese in Germany that is officially authorized to do these kinds of ceremonies. But also, even in Belgium, where we were, they didn't allow it in 2 of the dioceses bordering France, because they were bordering 2 dioceses that are more traditional, and they wanted to avoid creating some sort of competition. The gift of the Catholic Church is unity. And yes, the sacraments are like a very real part of what that unity looks like in real life. But the gift of the Catholic Church is unity. And like the wings of an airplane made of aluminum, or for our listeners abroad, aluminium, is just flexible enough. It can bend so that we can make sure everyone is accommodated to live the most Christian life that they are capable of, and to make sure at the same time that they are still part of the family. That was Pope Francis's gift. He was not going to at any point change church doctrine on anything. He did allow for a development of the idea of a blessing as a form of accompaniment, as a form of a petition to God to say, hey, I want you to walk with me on my journey to getting that bullseye. But he wasn't going to change doctrine, because he knows that even though doctrine has changed many, many times over the course of Catholic history on many issues, if it is done too fast, we snap and we have a schism and we divide. And that's where we lose, the 4 marks of the church: 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And the Holy Father has to be that symbol of unity. And so I really applaud the Holy Father for allowing this. The bishops in Belgium, at least, were all fully unified in allowing this. But just a quick overview of that ceremony. There were scriptural readings. There were readings about the idea that we are made to be in relationship with other. There was even that reading from Genesis 1, where you may be surprised. It says, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suited to him. And of course, as we've talked before, people always say, well, he made man and woman, but really what he's making is people that are complementary to one another. And we're starting to understand that people are made for that complementarity in different ways, even if the church doesn't recognize it as perfect, and we can accompany that. So my husband and I, we stood up at the altar. Do you remember the blessing?
I do remember the blessing.
It went on for a while.
It was beautiful, though.
It was beautiful. And then there was the final minute of it was sung in Dutch. So thankfully we provided an English translation to all the people in the pews.
Very appreciative of that.
But my husband and I stood up and we asked the congregation to pray for us. We said, God of love, to get to that. Oh, sorry, I am still emotional about this. God of love, today we stand before you, surrounded by family and friends. We thank you that we could find one another and wish to be there for one another in all circumstances of life. We pray, give us to be faithful to each other and deepen our commitment. We trust in your word and desire to give of ourselves for the greater good. And I won't say the whole blessing, but the priests that we had 2 priests there stretched their hands over us and said, Lord, you are love itself, the very essence of selfless giving and unity. As Daniel and his husband have opened their hearts to one another, sharing their lives in their love, they reflect in some way your divine image. We pray that their love may continue to grow, mirroring the boundless love that you have for each of us. May it be a source of strength, comfort, and unwavering joy in their lives. And Lord, as we acknowledge that love is the fulfillment of your greatest commandment, we also recognize that we fall short at times. We ask for your forgiveness and for any failures in love. And we pray for the grace to love more fully, more generously, and more compassionately. And then, of course, the blessing happened. And at that point, I'm thinking, let's go have beer. So,
which we did.
We did. We had lots of it.
There was lots of beer afterwards.
This is a moment that so many Catholics who have been told to keep silent about their experiences, about their desires, to pretend that there's something that they are not fully. For all of those who have not been able to live out the ethic of authenticity, this felt like a victory rooted in Christ's love. And it is so emotional to think about. And I know that for most of the world at this time, it's just going to be a spontaneous blessing. I love that we assigned a legal term to it, spontaneous. But some parts of the world, the church is ready to get off the fence and say, we're here to help you discern. We're here to help you find that bullseye in your life, even if we don't believe that you've made it right now. And there is no judgment for that because all of us are on the way. We're on this journey together. That's my hope for the church here in the United States over the coming decades. Of course, our politics is so polarized. We have to get over that. We have to understand that the fruits of the Spirit is not. I love some of the comments that we get.
I will say this, and you mention it at the end of every episode. I read the comments as well when they come in. I would like to say a majority of the comments that we get come from a good place.
Yes.
It's people who either share your message or it's people who are generally asking questions. And I think you do a great job at kind of doing a little bit of a deeper dive with some of those people that are asking questions. But then, like anything on the internet, you get your trolls a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And
Catholic trolls.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie. There has been some Protestant trolls on there too. But
all are welcome here.
All are welcome. Just be careful when you throw out the King James version out there. That's all I'm trying to say. No, I think at the end of the day, if you are engaging on social media on an account that has reached you for whatever reason, whatever the algorithm gods have prescribed your profile, if you choose to engage, whether it's positive or negatively, in some way, that person is thinking about that message, is
Amen.
thinking about what you're saying. There's a saying in PR that I love and I hate is there's no such thing as bad publicity, because publicity is still putting you out there, putting your message out there.
True. Well, Kanye really took that to a new level.
Oh, you know what? Kanye is a whole different podcast. But the whole thing with that is you're obviously here. Your ministry, Dan, is not super confrontational at all. It's your message through your own lived life journey, and it's wanting the church to be better for all. It's a super positive message that is honestly not controversial at all. It just focuses on a topic that in this country is hyper politicized. And that's the issue. And I agree with you. Hopefully in the next coming decades, the church will move past the political polarization that we have in order to not just grow our faith and community, but to grow as a country in the love that God has for us. Because like you said, we are created in the image and likeness. We all have a unique part of our creator that is in us to bring some sort of message to the rest of the community, to the rest of our population. And it's beautiful.
Definitely. You know, as I said before, the two preconditions for serious discernment, for me, I believe it's seeking holiness, which we define as trying to become everything that God made you for. It's a process. And also seeking authenticity. You know, those things don't happen overnight. They're not going to happen overnight with you, no matter what complicated situation you may be facing or juggling internally. And it's not going to happen overnight with the church. So don't, if somebody in the church shoots an arrow at you instead of the bullseye, Don't take the arrow out of your back and then fire it at the next person, because that is human nature. But we're trying to get that bullseye. And so we want to walk with you. There's no judgment. Each of our listeners here, as we close up, I might as well remind them, you're made in the image and likeness of God. And so no matter who you are, no matter how broken you may think that you are, there's something about you that can teach all of us, me, the church, even the Pope, about God, about the Creator who made you, that we wouldn't be able to discover for ourselves. And so my hope is that you'll have the courage to share your stories, because you teach us how to understand God. So thank you again for listening to this episode. I'm so grateful for all of those who have taken time to share their stories. I'm praying for you every day, and I hope that you find the courage to start telling people what it is that you're experiencing and helping the church move forward. God bless.